Okay, so I say okay, and you want to delete data, trends, and event log, and we typically say yes. There's the message that comes up again, so I silence that. But still I get not completed, but the patient circuit test passed, right? Because all that is just doing that compressible volume deal. So if we want, we can go back to the status key and go status, and we have all these things that we can look at from a biomedical standpoint. Can you see general? We can look at the software version and the serial number and the pressure coming in, and that's how I know that, see, we have no air pressure coming in, it says 0, but we have 52 psi coming in on the other. And then down at the bottom, the pre-use check was not completed, but the patient circuit test was. And then the last one, that's how, you know, you could go in if Mr. Joint Commission comes up to you while you're running the ventilator on a patient and says, did you do a pre-use check on this patient before you put it on the ventilator on this patient? And you can say yes, and he might say, well, how do you know that? Well, you could just plink this key while the ventilator's running and point to the fact that it says down at the previous pre-use check, not performed, but it would say in normal circumstances, performed on February 14th or whatever. It will only do that one time in turning the ventilator on and off. So in other words, if we did the pre-use check now and everything passed, we turn the ventilator off, and then next week we have to set it up on a patient. When we go to set it up, we're going to say, no, we don't want to do a pre-use check because it was done by so-and-so last week. If we're running the ventilator, it would say pre-use check not completed or not performed, patient circuit test not performed on that date, on whatever date that was. But on the previous pre-use check, it would have said performed on February 14th. So that the ventilator will record the last time it passed the pre-use check. But if you turn the ventilator off, you know, the patient's not going to come up, or we're going to move them to another room. So you turn it off, and then you turn it back on again, it will say not performed because you turned it off and you didn't do a pre-use check. So there was no, quote, previous pre-use check, if you follow my drift. So that's an electronic way, but it really is always will tell you if it was done, you know, since the last time it was removed from a patient. But then, do you have a sticker that you put on, or you don't put any stickers? You know that it's a clean ventilator because there's a bag over it? Okay. So we could go, if it failed and you have to explain to somebody, well, it failed, you can go to the status key and go down to where it says pre-use check and touch that pre-use check button, and you'll see which particular test it didn't fail, or it failed, which particular test it failed. And you can say, well, it failed the internal leakage test. Well, that tells a biomed guy that there might be more to it than just a simple leak in the system, that it could be inside the inspiratory side, or if it's a pressure transducer problem. Okay? But if it failed when you did the patient circuit test, then it's more likely that it's on the expiratory side, because if it passed the internal test, but it failed the circuit test, that message comes up that says check patient circuit and expiratory cassette. It can't be the expiratory cassette because it already passed the internal test. But it leads people to believe, oh, it must be the cassette. So let me check that. So that's when people were saying, oh, it doesn't pass, they go and get another one. And coincidentally, it passes because something happened in here to kind of fix the problem in the meantime. And you go, okay, it was the cassette. So it leads you to believe that it was the cassette, but it really wasn't. Okay? So in the event that there is a leak in the cassette, it's usually from a couple of different sources, just a couple limited sources. And what could they be? What have you guys found in your troubleshooting, you know, in terms of cassettes?
I don't do a lot of troubleshooting cassettes. Like, the only thing I do is the O-ring.
Fluid. Sometimes, for example, I get called quite a few times for people where no longer holds PEEP Like for example, if the peep's set at 14, it only will be reading 7.
Uh-huh.
We change out the cassette, and when you tip it, it'll have water in it.
Some water in it? Okay.
So then the new cassette, it's set at 14, reads 14.
Okay, all right. With the existing cassette, if you suspect that a problem, you can just, if there is water in there, just tip it one way or the other. And, you know, typically you'd have to drain it this way.
But if I pull the cassette out, I'm going to still have to do a pre-use check once I put it back in?
No, if you use the same one, because the ventilator has shaken the hand of this one.
Okay.
So if you take this one out and put this one right back in again, that
Yeah.
message won't appear, you know, assuming that you did the whole thing.
Okay.
You know, even if you took this and put it in that one temporarily, and then took it out of that one and put it in here, it'll still, because it still remembers this one as the last one it shook hands with.
Okay.
But if you took that cassette, put it in here, then you'd get the message, because it goes, I don't know you, I know your brother, but I don't know you, so I'm going to make you do the pre-use check again. You know, just check it out.
We did have also a few times when maybe they weren't dried thoroughly during the cleaning process, say flow transducer test failed.
Sometimes, particularly with the older, and you might still have some older style cassettes,
Mm-hmm.
this port right here, on the older style cassette, it's much smaller, the orifice is much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
That port mates with this grommet in here.
Yeah, since there's so few of us
Yeah,
with that grommet.
yeah.
Okay.
So this port mates up with that grommet.
So I got to move.
And when that port mates up with that grommet, this is underneath this grommet here is where the expiratory pressure transducer is.
Okay.
So sometimes during cleaning, if there was a water bubble left in, and as I said, the older style have a much smaller hole, so it's harder for the water to get out. That's why we changed it to a bigger hole. But what you could do is, if you thought that, okay, and I got the smaller one, just do this. If you had water in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
put it back in the machine, it'll work fine, because there was a little water bubble left in there that impeded the accurate measurement of pressure. But if it's a larger one like this is the new style, then it's most likely it's drained out and it's not a water issue.
Okay.
In terms of the cassettes, in terms of their longevity and how they work, the only time that you can throw a cassette away is if you ever get a red flashing message that says technical error cassette. That's the only time then, and let's say 80% of the time you could throw it away. If you had that error where it said technical error cassette, it usually means that something happened to the internal workings of the cassette, and it's done. It doesn't work anymore. But to give it a try, what you could do is let it soak in alcohol for 24 hours. You know, maybe there's something on a circuit board, maybe something on the flow transducer that just caused that error message, and then rinse it really well. Let it dry, try it again. If you still get the technical error cassette, it's done. You pitch it. But other than a technical error cassette, there's no reason to throw these away. The only issues that I have found that happen with these cassettes is, one, when you get a leakage and you know it's pretty sure it's the cassette, the hardest thing to find is that somebody took the ventilator and rammed it into a wall, and this cracked a little bit, but not obvious. It cracked right around here. And right around there's a little bit of a crack, and it's so small you can't see the crack. It's not obvious, but that's where the leak is occurring every time you try to do the pre-use check, or at the end of the pre-use check. These caps are called moisture caps. They cost like $15. If I took a screwdriver and put it underneath there and pried that plastic up a little bit, I might be able to get it off without cracking it. But most likely, if you try to take it off, put a screwdriver in there to try to bend it up, because there's just a little nub that goes over and clicks in place. If you just do that, you're probably going to crack the plastic, and then definitely you've lost this part. But when you take this off, this is what you end up with, that piece there. So, all they need to do, and then these nubs right here is where that piece goes back on again, and you've saved $1,000 cassette.
Yeah.
Okay? Probably for you guys, probably more like 800 or 850 or something like that.